Okay, let's get involved with our second step thus far in setting up our AWS to do lots of JavaScript. Now, just to kind of go over a little bit about what we're talking about. Now, traditionally, when we do web development, we boot up a Linux server and we put a MySQL instance on it. Now, what's kind of good about that is that that single server has tons of resources to handle the incoming traffic, grab data from the database, maybe run some SQL statements, and then return the textual results of your query back to your users. One of the architectural deficiencies of that solution, however, is that it's really hard to scale a unified data source that is based upon the disk of one server. You really want to collaborate the uses of many different servers to store data in many different places. The illusion of cloud computing is that you feel like you're talking to one server, when actually you're talking to many servers working together. So you want to have a service that takes your data from the get-go, breaks it up into many pieces, and allows you to access it very efficiently. And so the notion of making one server to host one web app is quaint, but it's outdated by about 20 years. The initial founders of Hotmail had to struggle with this problem as they installed more and more computers with more and more disk space in order to maintain the accounts of many, many users. I mean, if you think about that, the way the early web servers would have worked, the email services like Hotmail's, they would have, stored your account on a box somewhere, and that it would have looked up your account and then directed the traffic to that box, which is a little bit like how a cloud works, but a cloud really wants to break up all the data into many different parts, look for the server and RAM capacity within that cloud, and then grab your data from its resting place. So the modern cloud, in Amazon, is really able of handling a lot of accounts that way, and by building your business on top of it, you build in scalability from the get-go, which you don't need to engineer. And they've gotten much better about databases. So now we're not dealing with databases today. We're going to be dealing with databases in a later talk. Today we want to enable you guys to be able to upload images to your cloud, such as any given web service, website should. So the next thing, let's say this. Now you guys have gone ahead and you've gotten your Facebook account. One of the key services that Facebook provides is authentication. So you've probably seen this yourself when you go to a website and there is a login with Facebook that's happening on the website. That is because that website is asking Facebook to provide authentication services. So what happens is you type in your password username into Facebook, and if it's stored, then you won't have to. But then Facebook, it said, hey, is this person putting in the right username and password? And if so, it provides a cookie or a token back to the browser. And so when you point your URL back at Amazon, you'll get access to your cloud there because you've already passed the authentication stage with Facebook. So Facebook provides this what's called Open Authentication Protocol, or OAuth, to folks. So that's an important sort of building block in creating security for your site. Now, Facebook just provides that single security token, which says, yes, this person is whom they say they are. That's an important first step. But Amazon is going to do the hard work from there in creating what's called Identity and Access Management, or IAM. So the next stage is to go over to your Amazon console here and go down into Application, down to Security and Identity, which is IAM, Identity and Access Management. Basically, IAM is broken down into two things. One of them are policies, and the other are roles. Now, the roles are just things that people can acquire that give them freedoms, that give them permissions to execute certain things and access certain things within the cloud. So what you're going to do is you're going to create a policy. policies. We'll create a policy. And then in that policy, you're going to copy and paste this document. And you're going to place the name of your bucket right here for the sake of this application. And then you're going to create a new role. So you're going to go through this. And then you're going to do a new role. You're going to create a new role. Now, the key here is you need to enable this role for identity provider access and to grant access to web identity providers. And so you can go through the step there and you can remember that. And I'd like to go through this with you, but I'm actually just going to use the roles that I've built up and I'll allow you to follow the instructions here. And then you're going to attach that policy to that particular role. Now, what identity and access management means is it says, look, once you've authenticated and you are who you say you are, then you will inherit certain permissions that this website has created for you. And that may include, talking to a particular table in a database, maybe getting access to a particular bucket with a particular policy. If you take a look at this policy here, you actually have the ability to do an action on S3, so you can put an object, or you can place an object into your scalable storage service. You actually have freedoms to talk to this particular bucket. You also can list what's going on in the bucket, and this is the name of your bucket. And then there's a particular condition here where you're allowed to talk to this bucket so long as your S3 bucket matches this identifier, which is what you'll do. You'll see that takes place. So now you're getting there. So we're actually going to create a little bit of HTML here. So you can copy this, paste this into an HTML file. So you get your HTML, your head, and your script source is actually going to download this JavaScript from AWS every time you refresh the page. And then inside of your body, you're going to have an input type. It's going to look a little like this. That involves a file upload button and a file chooser. Now the other one will be just a generic button that will be called the upload button that will be labeled upload to S3, and what that's going to do is it's actually going to trigger the upload process. You're also going to have a div that's called results that will sort of tell you how it went, if there was success or failure inside of that div. Now divs are really just squares that are on web pages. Here's a working version of it. And I put on inspect element, where that's a div, that's the results div. You see that it lights up with results. And this is going to be the name of files that you have successfully uploaded, which will be listed there. And that's going to be your file chooser, and that's going to be your upload button. And I hope you like the inspect element tool. This is standard inside of most web browsers. If you go to Chrome or Firefox, they're going to have a similar page inspection tool. This is Safari that it's just kind of a cousin of. It's not a direct descendant of Chrome. Chrome is kind of its own animal. Mozilla Firefox and Safari have a lot more in common. So yeah. Now you can also see in this sample, you can see that, and this is the web page, but I'm actually going to unpack the JavaScript that you're going to write into the web page itself. Now you remember that app ID that we got from Facebook, this right here? You're going to put that right into this variable called app ID. And then the ARN is right from IAM. So let's say you have a role here. I believe I made a role here called CS. This is the ARN that's associated with that role. The ARN stands for Amazon Resource Name. And everything in AWS has an ARN. So if you make a search engine, it's using an ARN. If you make a bucket, it has an ARN. If you make a database table, it has an ARN. Every little thing in Amazon has an Amazon resource name. And so the ARN has this syntax where it says ARN, AWS, it's within the IAM service. This is your account. And this is the name of the role that you happen to be using. So then your bucket name, which comes from S3. And just to review how to get that. That's going to be whatever that happens to be. That's the name of the bucket right there, CSU 311. And then your bucket region. Now this is something I haven't spoken about, but as you navigate your Amazon, you realize that you're operating in a particular zone. Now S3 does not operate with any given region. But as you can see, you've probably established your account somewhere. I run it through Oregon. It's very cheap, and it has very, very low rates. It's not as fast. The two cheapest pieces of Amazon are it's East and West, what's called West 2. West 1 is 3 times the cost. It's in Silicon Valley. It's for sites that need to work right in the Bay. You know, God bless them. But we're Southern California, so we can operate just about anywhere we want. So I put it right in Oregon. It's in a data center that's by a huge dam, I gather, with a lot of hydropower. Right now I want to be able to develop it cheaply. So my bucket region, you can see it, my bucket region here is going to be lowercase US West 2. Now here, I'm actually going to be setting up my Facebook username. Then I'm going to specify my bucket here. And this is going to be the syntax that belongs to the Amazon JavaScript SDK. So if you're to type this in to your web page without linking to Amazon's SDK up here, stuff like AWS.S3 will be inaccessible. So what I'll do is I'll establish the S3 with a bucket that I'll talk to, and then within my script, I'm going to reference the file chooser by ID, and then the upload button by ID. Now, what's cool when you're making HTML elements is there are two kind of things that you take a look at when you're making an HTML element. One is whether it has a class, which will point to its CSS style, and the other is the ID, which is the way that JavaScript will access it. So for here, you're going to create a variable called file chooser that will point to the file chooser. And the way that we grab the events related to the file chooser are by saying document.getElementById, which is one of the key constructs for JavaScript. Or if you put an HTML element on a page and you give it an ID, then when you say document.getElementById, you can talk to that element using your JavaScript. So for example, you can know when people touch that button or click on it. You can know when people are hovering on something. The document.getElementId is kind of the engine that makes JavaScript talk to elements on your page. So in this case, file chooser and upload button, those are things that have already been given IDs. Those are configured by the programmer. And then results is going to talk to that text area, which is that div ID, which is going to look like this. That's going to be the results div right there. And the FB root div, that's something that you will have created, and frankly, Facebook will populate that div with its own business. For example, this is going to get sent to that box, and this is going to get filled in by Facebook. By the way, you don't have to code all this. Facebook sends all this to you. Pretty convenient. So what we do is, given the button, we're going to add an event listener that's related to its clicks. And then what we're going to do is we're going to grab the files related to the file chooser. We're going to grab the first file that gets chosen by the file chooser. That's how that looks. I'm going to run the file chooser. I'm going to grab a file. And if that file is present, then we're going to begin to talk to the results div. The results div, again, is this right here. It's this little text box right here. And the inner HTML, that's a critical building block for JavaScript, where if JavaScript can set the inner HTML, it can put text inside of a div element within your page. So if you think about the information architecture of your page is really just a series of divs, and the divs are big blocks. The inner HTML is the text that goes inside of those blocks. So from there, this will enable you to upload that object to the cloud. And then based upon its success, we'll tell you whether there's an error or not. And if it succeeds, it's going to actually list all the objects right here that are up inside of that bucket. And then if we don't choose anything, we're going to say, okay, nothing to upload. So I'm going to take another break again. You guys are just about ready to deploy this. And we'll save this video, and we'll make a third video to finish up.